So, what is the deal with California's economy? Is it this unstoppable powerhouse, or is it a paradise that's, well, lost? It really feels like a super concentrated version of everything advanced economies are getting right and everything they're getting wrong. Today, we are going to unpack the incredibly complex and often really contradictory story of the Golden State's economic engine. If you follow the news at all, this probably sounds pretty familiar. For years now, we've just heard this endless drumbeat of stories about companies fleeing, a massive poverty crisis, and a government that just can't seem to get out of its own way. It's a really powerful narrative, for sure, but is it the whole story? Okay, so let's start with that negative narrative, because the problems, they're absolutely real. And the most visible one, the one you always hear about, is the story of the California exodus, that constant stream of headlines about people and major companies packing their bags and leaving the state for good. So why are they leaving? Well, it's this brutal combination of factors. Just think about it for a second. Housing is completely unaffordable, the cost of living is through the roof, and if you're a top earner, you're paying the highest taxes in the nation. Then you pile on top of that all the visible social challenges, infrastructure that's crumbling, and these constant environmental threats like wildfires. And yeah, for a lot of people, the decision to pack up and get out starts to make a whole lot of sense. But what's really fascinating here is who is leaving and the reasons why. You basically have two totally different forces at work. For your average person, it really is a matter of survival. They're just being pushed out by the sheer crushing cost of housing and daily life. But for the wealthy, it's a completely different kind of push. They're being driven out by the highest state income and capital gains taxes in the entire country. So you have two different groups leaving for two very different but equally powerful economic reasons. So with this constant flood of bad news and a very real exodus of people and companies, you'd have to assume the economy is just teetering on the brink of collapse, right? Well, get ready for a major plot twist, because this is where the story takes a very, very sharp turn. Because despite all that doom and gloom, the actual numbers, they tell a completely different story. The reality is California isn't just surviving. It is, to this day, an absolute economic superpower on a global scale. Just let that number sink in for a second. Fifth. If California was its own country, its economy would be the fifth largest on the entire planet. I mean, we're talking about an economic output that's bigger than India's, bigger than the United Kingdom's. For a state that's supposedly broken, that is a pretty staggering fact. And it's not just big, it's incredibly dynamic. For decades, California's economy has consistently grown faster than the rest of the United States. And remember, the US itself has been one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. So despite all the headwinds, the engine is still humming along at a really impressive speed. And this incredible performance isn't just built on one thing either. California's real strength comes from its diversity. I mean, of course, you've got the giants, technology in Silicon Valley and entertainment down in Hollywood. But it's also a massive hub for finance. It's a global leader in high-value agriculture, and it's a critical center for aerospace and defense. That kind of diversity gives the economy some serious resilience. So this brings us to the central paradox, right? How can an economy with so many real, well-documented problems also be one of the most successful in the entire world? Well, the answer lies in a powerful economic concept that's been California's secret sauce for generations. And that concept is called agglomeration. It's a fancy word, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's the tendency for industries to do better when all their key parts are in one place. This creates a powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop where success just breeds more success, pulling in the best talent, the smartest capital, and the most groundbreaking ideas into one geographic area. And this is what that feedback loop looks like in the real world. Talented engineers and investors with cash move to California because that's where the opportunities are. This leads to new, innovative companies getting started. Then this whole ecosystem of supporting industries, lawyers, accountants, you name it, grows up around them. And this thriving hub then attracts even more talent and capital, and the cycle just repeats, getting stronger and stronger each time. But here is the major threat. That incredibly powerful feedback loop, the very engine that built California's modern economy, can also work in reverse. If enough businesses and talented people start leaving, there's less and less reason for others to come or even to stay. The loop can actually begin to unwind. And what's the single biggest threat to this whole model? Well, it's remote work. The pandemic was like this giant, unplanned global experiment, and it proved something that a lot of people thought was impossible. You don't actually need a California address to do a high paying job in tech or entertainment. This breaks a critical link in that agglomeration chain, and it lets talented people look for a better quality of life somewhere else.
And it's not just remote work. There are these other storms gathering on the horizon that hit California particularly hard. Global trade wars, they disproportionately affect its massive ports. Uncertainty around immigration policies could choke off the supply of skilled workers that the tech industry absolutely relies on. And those environmental threats, like wildfires, are becoming so severe they're making homes in some areas literally uninsurable, threatening the very foundation of its huge real estate market.
So, as we start to wrap this up, how do we make sense of these two narratives that seem to be at war with each other? How do we balance this perception of a broken state with the hard reality of an economic giant? A key piece of the puzzle is something we could call the magnifying glass effect. Because California is so famous and so influential, its problems get way more global attention than similar issues happening in other places. Think about it. Poverty in Los Angeles, broadcast to the world by thousands of influencers, gets a lot more airtime than poverty in a small town in Oklahoma, even if the actual rates are comparable. So what does this all mean? Well, the final verdict is really a paradox. On one hand, the narrative of a completely broken California, it's clearly overblown when you just look at the raw economic data. But on the other hand, the risks that could trigger a genuine decline are not hype. They are very real, and they definitely appear to be growing. And this leaves us with a fundamental, high-stakes question that is going to define the state's future. Can a global economic engine, a place famous for opportunity and chasing your dreams, actually survive if the very people who power that engine can no longer afford to live there? That's a challenge that California, and a lot of other successful places, have to figure out, and soon.